salutations this fine twilight. Ooh, this video has an eerie theme to it. We're an eerie bunch, and you know why? It's because a good amount of us here on this channel are proud and fervent devotees of the Winged One. Now, we all have our own reasons for stepping into the lights, but I'm sure one point of commonality for why we did was due to that cosmic horror, that lovecraftian horror that exists with the heavenly principles within Celestia, and our unwavering belief was only strengthened upon seeing Renova's form, but sadly, we got October surprised with Nod Cry, so the Celestia arc remains far, far away, meaning our chances to lay eyes on what could be that Eldritchian horror form of the heavenly principles, too, remains far, far away. Naturally, this saddens me. Who doesn't love looking at and discussing cosmic horrors, beings such as the Great One Cthulhu, the crawling chaos Nyarlathotep, and the blind idiot Azathoth? I figured I'd have to wait 3 more years to talk about beings like this. I'd be 27 then, practically ancient, at the twilight of my life, but then, out of nowhere, I was contacted. I was told about a game that doesn't just feature these cosmic nightmare horrors, it puts them front and center. It demands you listen to its hymn, its existential threats, it demands! My friends, that game is once human, a free-to-play open-world PvE or PvP, but that's right, you heard me correctly. This is not a gacha game I've come to promote. Everything is completely free in this Genshin Impact-esque survival game set in an apocalyptic setting. Free, contingent, of course. You're good enough to survive against the horrors. So, if you think you can, feel free to download the game by using the link in the description, or by scanning the QR code on screen to get access to over 1,000 rewards as supplements. Ooh, you're gonna need them, by the way. Oh, with that said, thank you to Once Human for sponsoring this video. Now let's get started. Sets in a world where, for the first time in human history, a mega corporation didn't act in humanity's best interest, because apparently miracles do happen in reverse, Rosetta tampered with an element called stardust, something that didn't belong to this dimension. Naturally, it went great. The stuff could infect humans who came into contact with it, turning them into monsters known as deviants, who can take many different forms, most notably the Wanderer, or Hale's house. Now, you or I, faced with this nightmare, would probably stop messing with stardust altogether, call it a day, maybe have a drink, but this is exactly why we aren't CEOs of mega corporations. Empathy. Hell of a drug. A Rosetta, who I can only assume looked at the twisted husks of what were once people, just sort of went, hey, it's probably a flesh wound, decided to double down. They opened a portal to the other dimension, and this led to the events we now call the Starfall, when massive amounts of stardust spilt into our world, turning it into an apocalyptic wasteland. But that wasn't all that came through. We don't know what they are, gods, devils, something worse. All we could do was name them the Great Ones, because nothing says power like capital letters. So that's what we're here to discuss today. The Great Ones, in order of elevating cosmic threats, of course. We'll start with the small ones, the local gods, and end with the World Eaters. Since the Starfall event, several Great Ones have slipped into our world, the first of which being the Ravenous Hunter, who first appeared in 2047, a monster that's seemingly adept at evolution. It refined its own body, equipping it with armaments like a machine gun, as well as rockets, but that's not all. If you look closely, you can spot humans absorbed inside its body. The Ravenous Hunter doesn't just adapt to its surroundings, it forces its surroundings to adapt to it, be it as a consequence of its outer worldly origins or a result of its own machinations. The area in which it's taken up residence is now the victim to a spatial disturbance that's currently violating all our known laws of physics. The next great one is Treant. First appearing in 2048, Treant blends in with its surroundings and takes the form of different types of flora, mainly branches and vines. Perhaps the most hungry of all the great ones, Treant's preferred choice of food are humans. Each time it consumes a human, it grows in size, but that's not all. Like you and I might enjoy different types of pizza, Treant enjoys different types of humans. It prefers pregnant mothers and animals, turning them into trees. An important thing to note about Treant's appearance is the lady on its back, shrieking in agony. No one knows who this is, and no one dares to find out. The next great one is the arachnid Araxium. It's adopted a human host, and as we can see, ripped it apart to fit the mold it wanted, resembling a spider. Whether it's actually meant to take the form of an earthly spider, a sort of psychological attack against humans who, as we know in great numbers, fear spiders, or it's meant to resemble something from its own world, we can't possibly know. Araxium, the weaver and nurturer of the heterospace, it weaves its own huge cobwebs and spawns countless offspring. Those offenders who break into its territory will become bait for breeding offspring. It has since taken up residence nearby an old abandoned hospital to lay its eggs, which are said to be especially poisonous, and like the ravenous hunter, the area here is the victim of a spatial disturbance defying the laws of physics. The next great one is Rebezex the Shadowhound. It takes the form of a giant mutated canine with teeth on its legs. Rebezex may be the most terrifying of them all, not because it's the strongest, but because it might be the weakest. To us, Rebezex is a nightmare carved from darkness, a great one in every sense, but on its home world, a dimension we know nothing about, it's a servant, a hound on a leash, answering to something far more ancient and far more unfathomable. As the old texts say, the Shadowhound is the hunter lurking in the dark, a loyal servant to powers unseen. It lives in shadow and leaps from it to devour whatever crosses its path. And finally, we're reaching the crux of this list. Just as there is a king amongst the gods, so too on earth is there a great one of the great ones. The forsaken giant Mensdeveron. A towering colossus of twisted branches and malformed limbs, crowned by a halo that floats above its broken form. It never moves, only weeps stardust. When Mensdeveron attacks, it does so like a god that's been cast out and forgotten, and beyond this, nothing more is known about this giant. No known origin, no purpose, just the sound of weeping for unknown reasons, and the weights of something ancient. However, you might have noticed I did something. Of the great ones we've spoken about, we only brought up the ones presently on Earth. These are the weakest of the great ones, as the rest remain in their home worlds. But if the great ones can be likened to the shades of the heavenly principles, then in once human, who are the heavenly principles? Who is that primordial God? My friends, let me introduce you to Manibus, by far the most powerful great one to ever reach Earth. It takes the form of tentacles reaching into the sky. Manibus acts as a branch between our world and its. But let me ask you something. What does Manibus look like to you? What does this form remind you of? Something reaching, something grasping, something attached. You've seen this before, not the image, but the motion, this behavior, the instinct. It doesn't observe, it gropes. It doesn't announce itself, it feels its way through the veil. We assumed Manibus was a monster, but monsters don't reach. Manibus is not a being, it's an appendage, a single limb of something far more ancient, a finger extended across dimensions, the first part to arrive, and the last part you'll see before you're gone. It belongs to Ilmati, the mother of Ether. She is the oldest prime level entity, the most influential, and the most inevitable. She is the source of all the monsters we see. The others she spawns brings madness. She brings meaning, a terrible, final meaning. Her very concepts infect language and thought. Completion, degeneration, unification. When the great ones she spawns leaves the host, they aren't free. They're pieces, meant to return. When enough have gathered, when the resonance is perfect, the mother of the firmament opens herself, and they crawl back inside. This is not infection, this is not invasion, this is ascension. Should Mother Ilmati ever breach into our worlds, it would be the end. So, any of these primordial horrors tickle your fancy? Well, if they did, prove it. Head to the description, download the game, and fight them, and who knows, maybe one day, Ilmati will breach that firmament. And maybe, just maybe, the Earth is gonna need someone like you to defeat the ravenous hunter child born from nothing. To defeat Araxia, Arlecchino of another world. To defeat Manabus, who, like Renova, keeps watch over our world. Maybe you will be the one to take them down.